The history of the teleporting humans, a retelling of our past. It is easy to forget how far we have come. Today, we take for granted the ability to step from one place to another instantly, to cross the world in the blink of an eye, to exist in multiple locations in a single day without ever taking a step. But there was a time when humanity was bound by the limits of distance, when movement was slow, when travel was perilous, when war and conquest were determined by geography. That was before the Great Shift. The dawn of the teleporters historians debate when the first teleporting humans emerged. Some say it was a slow adaptation, an evolutionary quirk that began in the most ancient of ancestors, a survival mechanism meant to escape predators. Others believe it happened suddenly, a rare mutation that allowed early hominins to vanish from one place and reappear in another. At first, it was instinctive. A frightened child, cornered by a predator, would suddenly appear atop a tree. A hunter, in the heat of pursuit, would lunge for a deer, only to find himself inside the beast's ribcage, a fatal miscalculation. The ability was wild, unpredictable, dangerous. Many who teleported in those early days never returned, lost in the void of miscalculation, stranded in places they could not escape. But those who survived? They became legends. The age of vanishing kings. The first great teleporters were worshipped as gods. Before humans understood the science of their ability, they spoke of the vanishing kings, rulers who could appear and disappear at will, unbound by walls or armies. It was in this era that warfare as we knew it collapsed. No fortresses could hold them. The first walled cities were abandoned. For what use were walls when a single warrior could materialize behind them? No battlefield could trap them. Soldiers learned that to fight was to vanish, to strike and disappear, leaving enemies swinging at empty air. No ruler could rule alone. Assassins were unstoppable, able to step into a throne room, dispatch their target, and be gone before the guards even registered the threat. Thus, kingdoms fragmented into an age of chaos. Rulers were no longer kings of land, but kings of information, for the only advantage was knowing where and when someone would appear next. It was a world in flux, until the arrival of the calculators. The age of calculated travel teleportation, once random, became something more. Mathematics unlocked its secrets. It was the scholars of the sky, a secretive order of thinkers who first devised the concept of fixed points. Locations where teleportation could be anchored to avoid the dangers of misplacement. By marking specific spatial coordinates, teleporters could lock onto locations with accuracy, reducing the risk of vanishing into nothingness. This led to the first true civilizations, where cities were not built for roads, but for anchors, monuments and structures designed to act as safe points for teleporters to land. These cities grew vertically, not horizontally, as height allowed for easier jumps between locations. Trade flourished. Markets no longer relied on slow-moving caravans. Merchants vanished and reappeared with goods instantly. War became espionage. Armies became unnecessary. Instead, wars were fought with spies, sabotage, and assassinations rather than open conflict. Borders dissolved. A nation was only as strong as its teleportation networks, regions marked by safe zones rather than rigid borders. It was an era of order, but order breeds control, and control breeds rebellion. The Anchor Wars, when humanity fought the air itself. With the rise of anchors, teleportation was no longer free. Those who controlled the largest teleportation hubs became the lords of civilization. They dictated where people could go, when they could travel, and who was permitted access to the fixed points. Thus began the Anchor Wars, a century of rebellions, sabotage, and shifting alliances as free teleporters. Those who rejected the control of the Anchor Lords fought to reclaim the skies. Anchor monuments were destroyed, forcing teleporters to take dangerous, uncalculated leaps. The science of traps emerged. Just as one could teleport freely, so too could one be caught mid-jump, pulled into false destinations and prisons. The War of the Frozen Ones. In an act of desperation, Anchor Lords began setting dead zones, places where teleporters who entered never left, locking countless rebels in timeless, motionless limbo. The war ended not in victory, but in compromise. The Anchor Lords remained, but teleportation became a universal right, free to all, regulated only by the natural laws of physics. The age of war was over. The age of expansion had begun. The age of everywhere, a world without distance. By the time the first global teleportation network was established, the world had already stopped thinking in terms of nations. Cities were no longer bound by proximity, but by interconnected teleportation routes. Workplaces ceased to exist. No one commuted. People teleported in and out of offices in fractions of a second. Language barriers crumbled. The world was no longer divided by continents, but by instantaneous interaction between cultures. Families never left each other. The idea of being far away was a myth. Anyone could appear before their loved ones at any moment. The sky towers were built. The highest points in every city became the primary teleportation zones, where billions of people phased in and out of existence every day. Time zones became meaningless. Countries became concepts. The Earth became one city. But humans are never satisfied with one city. The final expansion, a civilization without borders. When distance was no longer an obstacle, when no place on Earth was unreachable, the question became, where next? The answer was space. Moon colonies were instantaneous. No rockets, no delays. Teleporters simply jumped to lunar bases, creating entire civilizations overnight. The Mars Exodus. When Earth became too crowded, humans simply stepped into new worlds, populating planets without ever launching a spaceship. Beyond the solar system. There is no longer fear of the vast, empty distances between stars. We do not fly. We do not drift. We step. In 1,000 years, we have colonized the void not with ships, but with footsteps. We no longer measure distance. We no longer fear the abyss. We are everywhere. And so, as we look back on our history, we must ask, what is next? What happens when a species that once conquered distance has now conquered time itself? But that, dear reader, is a question for the future. For now, step forward. Wherever you wish to be, you are already there.